Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Curt Thompson.
And my friend, Pepper Sweeney.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hey, Curt.
Hey, Pep. Good to see you.
I'm sure it is good to see me. It's good to see you. It's good to see you as well. Always good to see you. You know, we are here in episode 7 of season 6 of the Being Known podcast. And this episode is titled, Where Are You? And Where Are You Going? Where are you? And Where are you going? It's a state of domain of mind. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about today's episode. Let's just jump right in.
So we've been tracking over the course of this season of the beauty of wisdom. We've been tracking on wisdom and seeing like what is that? How do we become people of wisdom? And as a podcast that has really worked to bring together these fields of neuroscience and spiritual formation, this notion of being known, this notion of creating and curating beauty and goodness. It's easy, I think, for us to somehow think that wisdom, like, oh, that's like an add-on. It's this thing that we know is important, but what's it got to do with neuroscience? And what's it got to do with, with neuroscience, with interpersonal neurobiology, and in particular with a thing that we call states of mind.
Yeah.
This notion of how we tend to change from moment to moment. We tend to change from state to state to state throughout the course of our day, throughout the course of our lives, and are often not aware that we're doing this. And as such, though, we come to discover that when we pay more attention to this question of where am I in my state of mind, and where am I going next in the next 2 seconds, in the next 5 minutes, where am I going next? Where am I and where am I going? Are important questions that get us closer to the beauty of wisdom. And that paying attention to the brain's states of mind can be an effective tool for helping us get there. And so, with that before us, we'll just remind our audience that, and we've talked about this in other episodes, that we are people, like other animals. We are people who live in the course of our day in the context of what we call states of mind. Now, we've heard this. Billy Joel sings of this. And we talk about it colloquially. We like, oh, I'm not in a very good state of mind. And we think that we're just using metaphor, but the reality is that our brains actually enter into different stable neural patterns of firing that are to be equated with this thing called a state of mind. And so there in the fields of neuroscience, there's a kind of a technical way that we define this thing called a state of mind. What is that? What is a state of mind? And we like to describe it. This is kind of a bit of a long-winded thing, but we say it's a firing pattern of neurons. So our neurons, if I'm listening to you tell me a funny story, like my neurons are primed for a particular pattern that they're going to be in. If I'm listening to someone give me instructions about how to fix a faucet, that's a whole different set of neurons. And if it were me, like I would need far more neurons than I have.
It makes me think, you and Amy sometimes will talk about the pause. You'll say, I don't know whether something that I say is whether I'm going to come out with something funny or whether it's going to be serious. So I'm sitting here thinking, you're in a state of mind and it's kind of in flux. You aren't quite sure, like what state to be in. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. And so now, and now that you've said that, I'm not sure that this is good that you know this or not, because
this is
like
perfect.
you're just kind of like being yourself, doing your thing. And now I'm thinking like, oh, now I can do this I can exploit this I can exploit this to the max with them.
That's right.
But we're going to get back to that. We're going to get back to that whole thing about the pause in just a bit. when it comes to like talking about transitions from one state to another. But we have these firing patterns of neurons that we like to say they remain stable and predictable over time. Now that's, I don't mean again, kind of like how a common way of, I mean like kind of scientifically, if we're measuring that a pattern of neurons will continue to fire predictably, and by stable, we don't mean that that's always enjoyable, right? If I'm in a state of fear, and the thing that is evoking my fear remains near me, that pattern will be, by stable we mean it remains present and continually active. It's not going off and going in a different direction or another. So just because it's stable doesn't mean that it's always pleasant.
Okay.
Right? So if, it's kind of like if your house is on fire, the fire is actually stable if it is continuing to burn at the same rate. Now, that's not a good thing.
Right.
But if that fire then starts to jump to the neighbor's house and the next neighbor's house, then it's unstable in a bad way. Technically, from a scientific standpoint, we would say that if the fire department gets there and starts to put it out quickly, now it's also unstable. The fire itself is unstable in that it's not able to maintain itself. So that whole notion of being stable and predictable, we know that, given the circumstances, it's likely that 10 seconds from now or 5 minutes from now, I can predict we're still going to be in this state of mind. With respect to encounters in the environment. So here are just a couple of examples that are easy for us to think about. So if I go to work every morning, my alarm goes off, I get up, I turn the alarm off, I crawl out of bed, I go do what I'm going to do routinely. Whether it's I get in the shower, I get breakfast. A lot of that can happen from the moment that your alarm goes off. Many of us, we can think that, we're kind of moving rather automatically through our morning. Now, it doesn't mean that, like, it's all rote, but, like, I move pretty much with that same pattern. And if we were to track the firing patterns that your brain both fires and that from moment to moment is anticipating is going to happen next, your brain is primed to be in a particular pattern, a particular state of mind. I'm going to get up and go to my shower, breakfast, get in the car, go to work. That'll be a very different pattern that is firing in your brain because the things I'm imagining and thinking about and so forth that are all on the right half of my brain and the language is my left half of my brain. That's very different than if on Saturday morning I'm going to get up and go play tennis. The alarm still may go off or it may not go off because I'm not playing tennis until 10. So I wake up and it's a completely different way of getting out of bed. My mind is in a different pattern of firing, both stable. But then we would say there are also what we would call states within states. And if our listeners can think about, if you know what I mean when I say the Russian nesting dolls. Now, if you can pronounce this word, Pep. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's how it's spelled, but that's the English spelling. Matryoshka.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Matryoshka.
Okay, so to get a Russian accent, you put it in the back.
Wait.
Right?
Especially, yeah.
So it's like this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You put it in the back throat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You put it back in here. So Matrishka doll.
Dude. That's killing it.
There it is.
Dude, like you should be an actor.
Well, yeah. Tell it to Hollywood.
Oh my gosh. No, seriously, that's really good. Wait, okay, the whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, so a dialect coach, I had to play, I did a play where I played a Russian guy and I had not done really a lot of accents and they brought this guy in to work with me. And that's one of the tricks that he taught me. And it was just easy for me to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the front of my mouth, like I always talk, and then to put it back in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You put it back in there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. No. Like so. Okay. Wait. Before we get to the Russian dolls,
yes.
Russian nesting dolls. Well, I want to say something right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So this reminds me. Oh gosh, I'm going to say it now because I might want to talk about it later, but I'll forget about it. You are Pepper Sweeney, but when we've told this story more than once here because I just love it. But the story of your being the grocery delivery boy,
mm-hmm.
you have to do the work of imagining not just lines. Oh, these are the lines that the delivery boy delivers when he goes onto the stage to play. Okay, I know you might not want to do this. Like, okay, so real quickly, tell a story. Yeah, no. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I will say, I want to say this first, is the interesting thing is when you show up to that first day of rehearsal, the lines should be done already. Like, you should have the lines. Like, that's not the work. I mean, it's work, but it's not the work, right? I mean, you have to get rid of that so that you can start to really do the work, all the imagination work, all of that. I think I've said once before, my teacher, Charles Nelson Riley, said that the author is responsible for the black on the page, but the actor is responsible for the white between the words, right? So the story that Curt is talking about, and I have told it several times on this podcast, but
I love it every time.
We do know that we have new listeners every week. Was when I was a young actor and I was an apprentice at Burt Reynolds Theater in Jupiter, Florida. I was doing a play. I had a small role in a play. The play was called "And Miss Reardon Drinks a Little," and it was I played a grocery store clerk, a grocery store delivery boy, who comes into a scene, delivers the groceries, has a few lines, sets them on the counter, and then leaves. It's not a real long scene. It's not and having this smaller role in this play afforded me with much more time to do much more imagination work. And this was when I was first sort of learning about this imagination work. I was just coming to understand it, and this really, it gave me, I benefited a lot from having the time to be able to do it because, so I would sit every night before I would go up, before my entrance on stage, and I would go through, in my mind, I would be at the store. I knew what aisle the groceries were on. I knew what the grocery list was, and I had, if you ever watch a TV show or something and somebody walks in with groceries and you can tell the bag's empty and there's just like some fake stuff, it just drives me crazy. That kind of stuff drives me nuts. Anyway, so I load the bag, the prop, and everything, and
in your mind,
in my mind, which I did. I do myself every night anyway in reality, but I'm sitting there right before I go on and I'm going through this process of going through the store and getting the groceries, and then how I get to the apartment building and get to the apartment building, and I hit the elevator button, I go up the elevator, I come down the hall, I go knock on the door, I go in and have the scene, come out and leave. Well, the one particular night I was sitting there going through this exercise where I was doing all the things. I'm knowing the sights, the sounds, the smells, everything, conjuring back things of when I was in New York City, and because that's where the play took place, and like literally like bringing back sensory memory of things that I had experienced there in the streets and all this. And so this particular night, for whatever reason, I decided I pushed the elevator button and the elevator didn't come.
In your imagination, that's the way it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Elevator doesn't come. Right. So I got to go to find the stairs, go up the stairs, and then go and knock on the door and go in and do the scene. And I brought all of that with me on stage, but I didn't come in going, nothing like that. I had those thoughts and everything in my mind. And I come out, I finish the scene, and I come out, and the director was in the house watching the play that night, and she came to me afterwards and she said, what happened to the elevator?
Dude, every time you tell this story, right? I get chills. I like my hair standing up. Like
it, and to me, that moment was so important to me because it taught me so many things. Like the importance of all this work, but it freaked me out that she knew that I took the stairs instead of the elevator, and she said, what she said, in her understanding of it at the time, she just said, "Well, thought has energy, and the thought that you came on stage with these thoughts, and we felt that energy, which I find out years later from you is not too far from the truth.
Right.
And so but it's much more than just memorizing your lines, because I could have had that done day one and then just kicked back and not done any of the rest of this work.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is a powerful testimony to the very thing that we're talking about, because you, I'm just going to name this, and we're going to go back to finishing up our Russian nesting dolls for just a second, and then we're going to come back to this, and that is this whole notion of the degree to which we are in states of mind all the time. The question is, to what degree are we paying attention, and then how do we direct our attention to be in particular states of mind, which is exactly what you're describing that you did.
Yeah.
And to testify to the fact that when we choose to have states of mind, like your director, like she's not even the actors that are interacting with you on the stage. She's watching this from the house, and something between you and where she sits in the house is affecting something.
Yeah.
This is not just because she's just smart.
Right.
And I think that this, again, right off the bat, reminds us that wisdom is not this abstract thing. Wisdom is a thing that is felt in the room. Because this is the presence of the Spirit of God in the material world as it manifests through the physics of nonverbal cues, of the energy that she and that you are talking about, and that we actually have far more leverage in our life to be people of beauty and goodness and wisdom than we give ourselves credit for, often because we're actually not paying attention to what we could be paying attention to, and we aren't because our attention hasn't been drawn to ourselves in helpful ways relationally through secure attachment. So, I mean, someone along the line was investing in you in such a way and inviting you to imagine these kinds of things, such that your decision to shift your state of mind made a difference.
Yeah.
It's a very, very big deal. Okay, can you say it one more time? The Russian name?
I have to look at my notes. I gotta get it back there.
Yeah.
One,
Okay.
2, 3, 4, 5. Matryoshka doll.
Right. Okay. That's just fascinating and beautiful. You were saying it again?
No, I was just looking to make sure I got it right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think our audience, you might be aware, like these Russian nesting dolls, a small doll that sits in a bigger one and a bigger one and bigger, and everybody 6 or 8 or 12 of them, however many there are. But this notion of a state of mind, like I can have the state of mind, I think that we know it. Yeah, we get it. The difference between the state of mind I enter in when I'm going to work versus when I go to play tennis. But there are larger states of mind that we have. So I go off to work in the morning. And when I'm at the office, there is an overarching state of mind that I have for the 8 to 10 hours that I'm there. But within that larger dome, that state of mind of I am at work, is another set of states of mind that happen with each hour with each patient that I have. And so I have a different state of mind with my 9 o'clock patient than with my 10 and so forth and so on. And then when we have staff meetings, these are different. But even within each hour with each patient, we have moments where we have different states of mind that we enter into. Like the state of mind of where I'm really empathic, and then there's the state of mind in which I'm like trying to work hard not to fall asleep. Or I'm irritated, or all the different things that are happening. Recognizing that state of mind isn't just within me, it is between me and the other person as well. And the real question is, am I aware that this is the state of mind that I'm entering into? So we can find ourselves across this span, and what we then see that is most important about these different states of mind is how it is that we transition from state to state to state to state. If I decide at the end of the day, I've said this here before in other places, right? If I forget when I go home that I'm now not at all at the office, I can behave as if I am at the office, and that doesn't always serve me well.
Trust me. I mean, there was a time, years ago that I would literally sit in the driveway to have a transition.
Right.
To have a transition before I go in the house. Because that guy is not the guy that needs to be coming into a house full of small kids that my wife's been taking care of all day.
Right.
The guy who's telling people what to do, and it should be a different entrance. I sat there long enough to fill that bag with groceries. I need a transition here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we notice then that part of wisdom is attuning to the transitions and these changes in the states of mind that I can enter into. And we can enter into these states of mind intentionally and consciously. So like for you to decide, I'm going to pause in my driveway before I go in the house. And I'm going to envision going into the kitchen. And I'm going to have to gear up for my next job, for my other full-time job. And then, but we also find that sometimes these transitions are involuntary. I find myself suddenly irritated, and before I know it, I got stuff coming out of my mouth that is not going to serve me or the other person well.
When words are coming out of your mouth and you don't know what they are until you actually hear them. I didn't know I was going to say that. How did that escape?
Oh my gosh. And why is it that there are so many times that like I'm thinking, no, don't say that. Don't say that. And then the moment I start to say it, it's as if something possesses me, and instead of stopping, the words themselves feel like, no, I got to get out of his mouth as fast as I possibly can before he has the chance to stop me. I mean, why do I do that? Right. And so we can have these involuntary transitions that are both conscious and non-conscious. My non-conscious one, like we'll wrap up this and we'll be done, and there's going to be a transition. For instance, there's going to be a transition, like this will be a small one, but there'll be a transition between our conversation and when Amy joins us. And there'll be another transition between that and when we wrap things up and I then go get lunch. Those are small transitions. And I'm not thinking to myself, oh, now I'm going to transition and go get lunch. We just kind of do. It's still willful, but it's not really all that conscious. It's involuntary in the sense that I'm kind of automatically doing it. Voluntary in the sense that I'm still willfully doing it. But the question is always, to what degree are the elements of the way that I don't wisely live in the world tend to be in charge of these transitional periods? Whether they're large block periods, I'm coming home from work and now I'm at home, or there are these micro moments where I'm in the middle of a conversation with a patient and before you know it, like I'm saying something that is not going to be helpful while knowing they're still going to pay me at the end of the hour, which feels like not the best, right? Just speaking for all therapists out there. But then we also recognize that we have these, with this recognizing that no small part of what it means for us to grow in wisdom has everything to do. Has everything to do with the stress of transition from state to state to state. My capacity to pause and be aware that I'm about to transition to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
It reminds me, I used to have I have an Apple Watch, and I used to have all these notifications on it for work, and I'd be in a conversation with Nell, my wife, and I'm here, this is my state of mind, and and all of a sudden this thing goes off, and I'm gone, and I'm no longer here. Yeah. And then she's gone because, because I just left the building, so I had to change that. I had to stop that from happening anymore.
I mean, okay, perfect example. I mean, how many of us, we're doing any number of things. We go to lunch with a friend, and the friend puts their phone down on the table. Yep. And the notifications come, and you see the friend turn. They look, I hate that.
Well, and you have talked about, or we've talked about this. I think it was we first discovered it in Hamlet's Blackberry, that book. where if you have your phone on the table between you and somebody you're having a conversation, that neurologically things are changed in your brain because this thing can capture your attention at any moment, right?
Right.
Is
right.
That, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it gets on, there's research now that we've mentioned this as well too, where newborns, infants, toddlers' attachment patterns are shaped by a parent's phone being in the room. Parents don't even have to be on their phone. The phone can be in the room, and the parent is aware that there's a part of them that is anticipating, waiting for, primed to look for the phone, and that part of them is not attuned to the child. And the child senses this divided attention.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so recognizing that the growth for us requires our capacity to attune in the present moment, it does require effort. It requires work in that sense. Not work that is necessary, but I love being entertained by my phone. I love something else doing the work that can draw my attention to it rather than me having to do the work. I mean, that story that you tell about the grocery delivery boy, like, it requires a ton of work on your part with intention, doing the thoughtful, imaginative work of what it means to be a grocery delivery boy. It's not going to be done for you. We also know that this kind of work, though, is best navigated in community. And by that we mean that if we are all working together to be mindful of our states of mind together, then we benefit from this practice and process of having that taking place for us. If I know that other people are doing this work together with us, which is why as we talk in here about being known, if I'm going to be in a community in which the state of mind that I'm in can transition, that we can really attune to that, pay attention to that, name that together, I become more effectively able to be aware of it, while at the same time, eventually, it is my job and my job alone to regulate my particular state of mind. I can't just say, well, you all out there are going to have to do whatever you need to do in order for me to be okay. This is why culturally we're in a rather strange moment where the whole notion of I don't feel safe is the kind of phrase, I don't feel safe, which implies that I'm ultimately not responsible for my state of mind. I'm requiring the rest of the world to bend to my will. That's different than saying I'm afraid and I need to do something about my fear, as opposed to I don't feel safe relative to the circumstances in the environment. Now, this doesn't mean that safety is unimportant. Safety is hugely important. But even the way that we language our description of the state of mind that we are in is such that it becomes easy for us to imagine that the rest of the world is utterly responsible for ensuring that I am comfortable and confident in my skin.
I had a pastor that used to say, if somebody pushes your buttons, it's your job to get rid of the button. Because it's your button.
Right. Right, and granted, if the button they're pushing is my nose and they're hitting me with a frying pan,
of course,
right, we're talking about that. But I mean, we are in our cultural moment. That's not mostly what we're talking about anymore. And so eventually, I have to manage my buttons. I have to be responsible. Like, what am I going to do about that? And which then gets us to this whole notion of the role that trauma and shame play. One of the things that trauma and shame do is it disrupts our ability to transition between states in a way that is regulated. If I have not addressed my unfinished business of shame and the disruption of trauma in my own life, my transitional state, my transition from state to state is going to be difficult for me to navigate, especially when those states come to me in unexpected form. When we find ourselves as parents, when we find ourselves dealing with a child who's now like kind of they've devolved into a tantrum for reasons that I don't understand. I don't really get that. Why is that the case? Or with friendships, or I mean, we often, when we think about those of us who are leaders, like who are responsible for systems, whether you're a church leader or you're a business leader, you're a teacher, you're an administrator. As we've said here before, that there's no system in the world that does not model itself off the family. None. And that means that whether you're in a school or whether you're in a company or you're in the academy or you're in a church, wherever, a business, somebody is going to be the parent, and somebody is going to be the firstborn and the secondborn and the thirdborn and so forth and so on. And somebody has to be in charge. And it's not just is someone going to be in charge, but in what way will they be? And the degree to which they are able to be aware of not just their own state, but how their states are being affected by the states of other people is going to determine to a large extent how the family is actually going to operate in the world. And trauma tends to disrupt my capacity to do that. It disrupts our ability to live in a world of probabilities. I'm not always able to predict the probabilities of things happening in a way. So I might be in a situation in which all it takes is a small stimulus to have me being worried that a really catastrophic outcome is about to take place. I can't, with good predictability, I can't predict what the probability are going to be here because of my own unfinished business, for example. And then this trends my mind increasingly in the direction of my need for certainty. I have to know that I know that I know how this is going to turn out. And this is where we come to discover that if I have to be certain, the more things I have to be certain about so that I can absolutely control for the transition from one state to another, that means I'm going to be in a greater state of isolation. Because if I'm going to be connected to you, truly, I'm going to be connected. If I'm going to be connected to real people, I'm going to be connected to people who ultimately I can't predict all the time. And they're going to do things that are not according to the way I want them to be done. And by that, I don't just mean what TV show we're going to watch. I mean, something else is bothering them and I say something and they speak irritably to me and it upsets me and I don't have the capacity to pause and transition into this collaborative state of mind with them and be curious about that. Instead, I need certainty that this will not happen, and so I leave the room and leave the house and get in the car. All these kinds of things that lead to me being more functionally isolated. And it also then just reinforces and empowers the role that shame plays in my life. If we are going to be people of wisdom, then we have to be people who do a number of things if we're going to enhance the intentionality with how we transition from state to state. Wisdom is about slowing our pace. Wisdom is a thing that we acquire over many, many years. I don't acquire it by cramming for a test, even if I get an A on the test. That's not wisdom. And this is difficult because I want to have all my T's crossed and I's dotted immediately.
Right.
It requires my practicing being receptive to love. That's how I slow my pace to anticipate the possibility that if we're in the middle of working out a rupture, that we can do that. And it might take 30 minutes for us to do that. I want to get rid of this feeling that happened in the middle of this transition that I didn't expect to have happen. I want to get rid of it right away. No, I'm going to have to slow my pace. But it is in slowing my pace that I also open the door eventually to being receptive to love, being receptive to the experience that even in this rupture, for instance, I can be loved. I can have that experience. And that requires co-regulation with other folks. And so we see wisdom, again, is not just a thing, this abstract thing. It's not just more information. It is about practicing the co-regulatory process of transitioning from one state to another in ways that allow me to do so purposefully, mindfully. We do this imperfectly. But again, I think it's helpful to remember this notion that when we are keeping an eye on the texts of Scripture, this ancient Jewish, messianic, meditative wisdom literature, each of those 6 words is a testimony to the length of time that it takes for us to meditate on this, to acquire this over time, and that our stories of wisdom are emerging over time. We're practicing this. Those who will hear this episode are going to, oh, this is great. I'm going to just think about this and go back and maybe listen to a couple other episodes that we've done where we talk about the transitions in states of mind and in somewhere in the next 36 to 72 hours, I'll have this figured out. No, what we're really doing here is we're saying, oh, here is another way for us to practice being known. That we will practice this imperfectly, but we will do it faithfully over the course of our lifetime because we're practicing for heaven. And we do that by repeating the work of curiosity, of receptivity, and of taking risks, being vulnerable. We talk about practicing being agents of and looking for, being seen, soothed, safe, secure. We talk about the tripod of awareness, that I want to be open, observant, and objective. And at the very end, we recognize that in order for me to transition well from one state to another, whether it's a big state, coming home from work and moving into my home, or if it's a state in the middle of a conversation, that I'm better able over time to make those transitions effectively to the degree, as I like to say, that to the degree that we attach ourselves to objects that have greater mass than we do. I tell this story of how a patient who he was a young father, and he had this 8-year-old boy who was just really into his little model planes that he had, airplanes. And this kid would, every night he would be flying them around his room. And this guy's wife, the kids are they're kind of all over the place, and he wants to get his kid. Can we get the kids to bed? It's time. They need me to get into bed. And, so she says to him, "Would you go in and, take care of Johnny and get him to bed?" And, of course, she's thinking, get him to bed. And they tell me this story later. She said, I walked down the hall, and there's my husband in the bedroom flying planes with our son. I'm like, this is not getting to bed. But what was Dad doing? Dad, who's 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. He's like a large object. And what is he doing? He is connecting with his son. And what he started to do was he was flying the planes, and then the plane would fly slower and slower and slower. And what he was doing was helping his child transition from one state of mind to the state of going to bed, but doing it mindfully. Mm-hmm. He's inviting that child to be attached, literally, to a larger object than him. When we attach ourselves and immerse ourselves to the Scriptures and to a community that is larger than us but has our interest in mind, it becomes the inertial force that helps guide the way in which we transition from state to state to state. We move at the pace of the community or at the pace of Scripture. I think about, I've been thinking about this recently just a lot. I'm just paying attention to this. I've had the opportunity. And you too, Pepper. You fly. There are seasons of life where you're flying quite a bit back and forth across the country, and you get in this plane. And what's really interesting to me is that the bigger the plane is, right? If I'm in a little regional jet, that thing is popping up and down, in and out. even if you can't sense the speed at which you're moving relative to the ground, like you're moving from you get in a wide body jet, and if all the shades are pulled on the plane, like you don't have any idea that once you get past take off and you reach cruising altitude, you don't even know you're moving.
Right.
You don't know that your body is moving at 600 miles an hour. Because we are attaching ourselves to objects that are larger than us. Wisdom becomes a way for us to attach ourselves to a larger inertial body that enables us to move from state to state to state, transitioning in ways that are much more effectively regulated. And we've not talked this episode about the book of Proverbs, but for our artistic offering, would love for you to talk a little bit about that.
So we have talked about the Bible Project here on the Being Known podcast. We are big fans of the Bible Project, and in particular, what we would love for you to spend some time doing, and it's not a long time, it's less than 5 minutes. If you go to the Bible Project, BibleProject.com, and the way I did it when I got there was you can in the search bar you can type in Proverbs, and the video will come up. They have these beautifully animated, short, artistic and great storytelling and all the things, and you will learn about Chokmah on this in this episode, which is Hebrew for wisdom, and it really brings the story to life. It really helps you to have a deeper understanding of the overall theme of the book of Proverbs. Can't recommend it enough.
And so, compiled with that, on top of that, we would love for you to think about this for our application in the coming few weeks. And again, it's an invitation, and it's an invitation for you to do something, but also then to observe what you sense the changes for you in the course of it. And that is that consider each day for the next 2 weeks reading the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, just straight through, just reading the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. Read it attentively, not reading it as if oh my gosh, I'm trying to learn something here, or I'm studying for a test, but read it meditatively. Take your time, read it through, but each day, straight through at one sitting. Not just, I'll read 2 chapters here and 3 chapters later, and just at one sitting. And then, after you've done that for 2 weeks, I want you to take chapters 8 and 9 daily for 2 weeks. Just read those 2 chapters. And pay attention to what you find yourself paying attention to over the course of that whole month. Not just what are you paying attention to in the scripture that you're reading. How do you notice that what you're reading is starting to work its way into your thinking, into your feeling? What are the questions that it raises? Notice to what degree you become increasingly aware of your states of mind and the manner in which you transition from one to the other as you are paying more attention not just to wisdom generically, but to what wisdom bids you to do. Pay attention to how this changes in the way you interact with others and make moment-to-moment decisions, these state of mind transitions. In other words, you're paying attention to the way in which you are listening to and becoming wisdom, listening to and becoming the voice of God in the world, which is what we were made to do from the beginning. And this, I would say, if you have questions about it, feel free to revisit that video, that overview of the book of Proverbs that Pepper mentioned. It's a great way to kind of anchor yourself in this application that we invite you to do as a way for you to become increasingly aware of how the becoming of wisdom is deeply connected to the neuroscience of our brains, and how paying attention to all that gives us a greater sense of what it means to live in the world as God would have us live.
Beautiful. Well said. Thank you, Curt.
Thanks, Pep.
This is a great episode, and we have to take a moment and transition
Right
if you were watching us on YouTube, because the Chachma of Amy Chella is going to be joining us here on video in just a couple of seconds.
Can you say Amy Chella? Can you say Amy Chella in Italian?
I can't. Okay. Saying Amy Chella is saying it in Italian, isn't it?
I think so.
You can say it. Try. Try.
Amy Chella.
I don't think I've ever heard my name. Wait, try. I'm trying to get my video on. Chachma and Amy Chella.
Chachma
of Amy Chella.
Okay,
Isn't it Amy Chella? No, it was something else. Sorry, I got that. Yeah.
Amy Chella.
Yeah,
That would
there
be
you go.
in Italian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, there's so much, which, I mean, like going to certainty and everything is a family system. Okay, there's so much. But Chachma, okay, so Pep, count to 4 in Russian one more time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
When you did that, I was like, what? What?
You just put it back there. That's all you have to do.
No, I tried it. I tried it. Trust me.
I don't know.
And sounded like I was swallowing my tongue.
Okay, so I was going to do this play, and this won't be a long story, but I'd never had a Russian accent before. I was really nervous about it. They bring this guy in, and it was like when he said, told me that trick, he said, just say, okay, say 1, 2, 3, 4 like you normally would, and you feel it in the front of your mouth. He said, now put it back in your throat. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And it totally worked.
Yeah.
Was he Russian?
No, he was just he was a master dialect guy. I mean, he could do any dialect. He was fantastic.
Wow.
Can't remember. Yeah, I'd love to be able to say his name right now, but I can't remember it. No,
but
I can't pronounce it. It would have been funnier.
You can remember it, but you can't
would have been
pronounce
funnier.
it.
Yeah, because he was a dialect
David Jones.
coach. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Scott Johnson.
Yeah.
Okay, language totally makes us slowing down. But then that makes me think of Pep, your story. I'm with Curt. I've heard that story a bunch of times. And every time you get to the part where, when you start saying, I was acting as if I had taken the stairs, and then when she says, what happened to the elevator? Every time. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh. But then you said, Pep, too, you said, I could have gotten the lines down in no time. But it took longer to do the practice that you did. But that to me is also, that's slowing down. Right.
Right. Well, I think, Amy, you've really put your finger on this notion that we often think about, when I think about acquiring wisdom, I think I just need to get the lines down. Yeah. I just need to know the lines. Again, that equated with the basic information that I often think is just not just the most important, but it's the only thing that's important.
Right.
And I discount the role, for instance, that my body plays in being the vehicle of wisdom.
Yeah.
Kind of like that 8-year-old boy's father who comes into his bedroom.
Gosh.
Like the dad's body becomes the vehicle of wisdom.
That's great.
Even speaking to his wife, who's working with, who knows that if they just went in chop, it would have ended up taking a lot longer to get this kid to bed than it did. So.
Yeah. And Curt, you mentioned it's generally fear-based that we move quickly. And and also I thought, okay, it's the illusion. Sometimes I'll feel like I have to say all that I want to say because I think I'll be more heard or more will be accomplished. It's not necessarily true.
No. I think this what for me has felt like a new revelation about the scriptures being written by those who wrote them. They didn't write them to deliver information that their readers could take in and just metabolize quickly. And now no, they were written with the understanding that this is a lifetime of revisitation. We're becoming deeper and deeper and deeper people of wisdom, deeper and deeper people of receptivity to love. And that, as it turns out, it's entirely likely that God is far more interested in being with us in that process than he is about measuring benchmarks about how far we've come in our growth. Which is not an easy pill for us to swallow. I'd like the benchmark because in some respects, I have two things. Then I know that, I can give my shame attendant, like and now he can fully retire because I've done everything I can do. And as well, this notion that I no longer have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to love me in the future. Am I going to be loved? Yeah.
Yeah. And then one more thing, the neurons firing and the transition. Okay, so, understanding what's happening is helpful. And a friend of mine he told me some news that was shocking. And he was telling me the news, and then he was continuing to talk, and I had to stop him because I was like, I need a hot minute. Give me a hot minute. Yeah. But there was shame right there at saying, why are you reacting so? Why is this hitting you so hard? You got to get it together. And it was like my neurons, like if I can picture my little neurons with love, and they were like, wait a minute, just, I need to process it. So just having words and an understanding of what's happening is super helpful.
Yeah. It's a really common thing. This happens in the office frequently. A patient is telling their story, and the story that they're telling is known to them, and they have learned to tell it in the way that where I'm going with this. They relay something about their story that is just beyond, how's that possible? And they're telling it, and they give you the piece of information, and they just keep going. And what's often striking to me is that when I say, excuse me, wait. Did I hear you just say that fill in the blank? And they said, yeah. And I said, that just sounds awful. And you watch as they tentatively make room.
Entertain the idea.
For their own shift of state of mind into that space of grief for the thing that they just named but have just flown by at 10,000 feet. And they start to feel things that are with them all the time anyway, but that they are burning energy to contain and to seal over. And all the energy, and so it is a state of mind that they have been avoiding. Because it's way too painful. Because their experience is that if I drop into that trough, I will be there alone.
Right. And oftentimes this is unconscious. This is not.
Of course. It's automatic, right? They've worked really hard to stay out of that, out of that state of mind. Without recognizing that, first of all, they're burning all this energy, that there's all this pain and so forth and so on. But also, they don't recognize yet that wisdom is to be found in that space. They haven't yet had the practice or experience of being loved in that particular grief. Their mind, brain, body, soul matrix does not yet believe that God is in that space waiting for them because they've been working so hard to seal over that particular state of mind. And if we think that wisdom is simply, again, the acquisition of information, as opposed to it is also the accumulation of the experiences of being loved in the middle of our grief, we shortchange it. Because when we allow ourselves to be loved, to be seen, soothed, safe, secure in these spaces of grief that we carry, it, over time, makes it possible for us to be channels of that same love for other people in their grief, because we are now unafraid of it, because we know what it's like to be in grief and be okay, because someone has come for us to be that. And that's how we then, someone comes to us and they're like, this horrible thing just happened, and you don't immediately give them all kinds of pearls of wisdom about what to do. Instead, you simply are with them. And later, they will talk about how they can't express enough how grateful they are for your wisdom. Because we are so primed to think it's just about what I know.
Oof. And that is where the beauty lies, because then, oof.
Yeah, right on.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Thank you for today.
It was great.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Till next time.
This podcast is produced by Curt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be known.